Hello YouTube and welcome to the next routes learning video. On today's video we're going to be visiting the Semmeringbahn route in Austria, and I'm going to be driving a run between Gloggnitz and Mürzzuschlag stations, which is a distance of just under 41 kilometers. This is a non-stop run and we're starting just to the east of Gloggnitz station at a red signal. The scenario which I'm using for this video is one which I found on Steam Workshop, called EC159 Croatia, and I'm presuming that we're following the real-life timetable of Eurocity train 159, which is bound for Zagreb in Croatia, hence we're heading in an easterly direction through Austria towards Vienna. Our train today is being hauled by an OBB class 1116 Eurosprinter locomotive, which is also known as the Siemens ES64U2 Taurus. The Tauruses have been manufactured by Siemens since the year 2000, and over 360 of these locomotives have been produced. Each locomotive weighs around 87 tons and has a maximum speed of 230 km per hour, which is just over 140 miles per hour. The 64 in the locomotive's name indicates the power output of 6,400 kilowatts, which is around 8,600 horsepower. The maximum tractive effort of the locomotives is 300 kilonewtons, which is around 67,000 pounds of force. Once in the cab of the Taurus, there's a few things that I need to do to set up the loco ready for departure. So the first thing I'm going to do is move the reversing handle into the forward position. And now normally if we were starting from an end station, I would turn on the headlights at this point. But as you may have noticed, I have already turned on the headlights, as they would be on at this point as we're in the midpoint of a journey. The next thing that I'm going to do is turn out the cab light with the L key. And then just looking in front of us here, you can see a set of switches. So I'm now going to click on the second switch from the right, which is the instrument light switch, just to turn the instrument lights on. And next I'm going to turn on the PZB system and also the CIFA system. So in Austria, we are using the same signalling system as we would use in Germany. I've now turned on the CIFA system as well. The signals do work slightly differently in Austria to how they work in Germany. I'll explain a bit more about that as we travel along on this journey. So now you can see in front of us the speedometer, which is measured in kilometers per hour, and we do also have AFB built into this locomotive. The speed limit here is currently 100 kilometers per hour, though it is very quickly falling to 80, so I'm going to set the AFB system now to 80, which as you can see I've done there using the Y key. And that will just prevent the locomotive from going above 80 kilometers per hour at any point on the journey. Now if you have a bit more of a look around the cab, you can see over here some more controls. So we have here the locomotive brake, which is in front of us now, which can be controlled with the two slash keys as sort of brackets. I'm not sure what you call these symbols, which are next to the P key. Also over here we have the brake handles. So on the left hand side there is the main train brake, and the right hand side is the dynamic brake. You can control these independently if you want to, however normally when you use the brake button it activates both the air braking system and the dynamic braking system. If we have a look over here now, you can see the brake gauges. The top gauge is the brake cylinder pressure, and I would normally try to not go above 2 on the brake gauge when braking in this locomotive, which is actually step 4 of braking. The brake handles down here have 8 steps of braking up to full service, so I try not to go above step 4 braking at any point on this journey. Unfortunately, when you're looking out of the front of the loco, you can't actually see these brake gauges very well, so I've got to try and rely on counting the number of times that I press the brake button to make sure that I'm in the correct step of braking. Now if we go over to this side of the cab, you can see here the AFB lever, which is the one on the left hand side of the two levers in the black rectangle there, and you can also see the throttle lever, which is the one on the right hand side, and you can move the throttle of this locomotive quite smoothly, so it's not a notched throttle. Last thing I'm going to do is just quickly sound the horn with the spacebar key. And now that we're pretty much ready to start, we'll just have another look at one more external shot of the train before departing towards Mürzzuschlag station. Departing away from Gloggnitz, the starting speed limit is 100 kilometers per hour, though it is very quickly going down to 80 kilometers per hour, and we had exactly 40.94 kilometers to go at our starting point to our first and only stop, which is at Mürzzuschlag. You may have noticed as I pulled away there the rather musical tones of this locomotive when powering up, something I really like about this loco, a bit like the German ICE 1 and 2. The speed limit now will soon be going down to 70 kilometers per hour, and we're now going uphill at this point. Indeed, on this route, for around 60% of this route, we're going uphill on a 1 in 40 gradient. And so I'm just going to idle the power at this distance signal here on this right hand curve, and now the train should be able to coast down to 70 kilometers per hour. Once we're down to 70, I will then change the AFB setting. So we're now just down to 70, just in time for the speed post there. I've now changed the AFB to 70. Now I'm just going to give us a bit of power. As you'll notice, once the speed is back up to 70 in a moment, it will now cut out. And as the speed falls towards 65 kilometers per hour, then the locomotive will gradually start increasing the power once again. Generally, when you're going uphill in this locomotive, the AFB system will maintain a speed around 5 kilometers per hour below what you've set it to. We're now coming up on Schlogmühl station. I must say, having now driven along this route a few times, that I genuinely believe this to be the most scenic route in Europe that DTG have so far made. I'm really happy that it's actually not in Germany and it's in a different European country, being in Austria for a change. And so yeah, just driving along here a few times and looking at the mountain scenery through the Alps, I have to say, this route is absolutely stunning. My only real complaint about the route is that I do feel it's a bit too short, as it's only just over 25 miles long, which isn't especially long for a route. Although due to the lower speed limits along here, it does take a bit longer to travel than, say, if you were doing it at East Coast Main Line speeds in the UK, in which case then the route would probably be over within 15 minutes or so. So yeah, I do really enjoy driving along here, and I hope to see more Austrian and other European routes as well in the future. The speed limit is now going up to 80 kilometers per hour, and I can accelerate towards 80 once we reach this next left-hand curve just coming up. So I'm just going to reduce the power slightly now before I increase the AFB setting, just to prevent there being too much of a jolt for the passengers as power is added. Now going back up to full power and accelerating up towards 80 kilometers per hour. I would just like to take this moment to apologise for it being so long between video releases. I believe that the last video I made was actually 3 weeks ago. And the reason for this is that firstly I went on holiday to Hungary for 5 days from the 10th to the 15th of January, which I have to say was an amazing experience, and Budapest is truly a beautiful city. I'll talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. And then unfortunately I also developed a cold and chest infection, which made me feel quite ill and also gave me a very hoarse voice, which really wasn't suitable for recording. And then this last week, now that I have recovered, I've been trying to make a video to put up on the channel, but I've encountered a few bugs with various pieces of DLC which I've been trying to use. For example, I was first going to make a video on the new Hamburg to Lübeck route. However, I had a bug with the ICE TD, and there's also a bug with the BR218, both of which were preventing me from making the video. With the ICE TD, it's particularly bad, because on some curves it was actually tilting the wrong way, which I found really disconcerting, and I really didn't want to make a video where that was happening. And with the BR218, there's just a discrepancy between the speedometer and the speed which it says you're travelling on the HUD. Such a discrepancy that it actually wouldn't be possible to arrive on time at any of your destinations when driving with the HUD turned off. We're now coming up on Payerbachgraben station. I'm just going to shut off the power at this point as the speed limit is about to fall to 70 kilometres per hour, just at the other end of the station. The gradient has levelled out temporarily, so I'm just going to apply some light braking just as we enter the station here. And I just want to ensure that we are down to 70 kilometres per hour in time. We're now down to 70, so I'm just going to release the brakes and now reduce the AFB setting to 70 kilometres per hour, just to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. We're now coming up on the first of many viaducts on this route. Indeed, there's a rather large number of viaducts and tunnels here, which I'm going to caption in this video. I did also encounter some problems with the PZB system on this route when I was practicing the run. I managed to resolve most of the problems I was having, but there is one bug which we will encounter as we approach Mürzzuschlag station, and so I'll explain a bit more about that as we get there. So while I was in Budapest in Hungary, I got the opportunity to see quite a number of trains. Me and my friend, we visited a number of railway stations there, and it was great to see such a huge variety of trains. I did actually post a number of photos from my trip to Hungary on the PTG Rail Facebook page, just so that people can see some of the trains that I got the opportunity to look at. I must say it's very much loco-hauled heaven. If you like loco-hauled services, then it really is the place to be. There are some more modern units there now, however they're still also using locos from as far back as the 1970s in the Soviet era, and they're using them even on local services, so it's great to see loco-hauled services being used on so many different runs, on so many different journeys in Hungary. The speed limit will shortly be falling to 60 kilometers per hour, just as we reach the next station along here, which is Kub. So what I'm going to do in a moment is I'm going to idle the power as soon as I can see the platform, and then the train will just coast down to 60. So I can now see the platform at Kub station just coming up. I'm idling the power at this point and we're losing speed quite nicely. We're now down to 60 kilometers per hour, so I'm just reducing the AFB setting, now giving us a bit of power once again. Also at this signal here, I now need to press the PZB acknowledge key as we pass it, because the distance signal is showing a yellow and 2 green lights. What this actually means is to expect a 60 km per hour speed limit at the next main signal, though as the line speed is also currently 60 km per hour, this won't actually affect us. So I think that it's probably more being used as a way to enforce the 60 km per hour speed limit, so the emergency brakes would be applied if I was to speed along this section. Whilst staying in Budapest, I also had the opportunity to travel over to Vienna in Austria by train, which I have to say was a most enjoyable journey. It took just over 2.5 hours, and the journey I think is around 120 to 130 miles. On the way to Vienna, we had a Hungarian MÁV train. MÁV is the name of the state railways of Hungary, and that was actually hauled by a tourist locomotive with Eurocity coaches, and one of the Great luxuries that I had there on that journey was compartments. It's a long time since I've travelled on a mainline train which actually had compartments, and so it made a really nice change. Also, on the way back from Vienna to Budapest, I had the opportunity to take the Railjet train, which is of course also hauled by a Taurus loco, and that was a most enjoyable journey again. And that wasn't the only train journey which I had the opportunity to take, because just before the end of the week, we took a train for about an hour and 20 minutes up to a small town called Starovo in Slovakia, which again was a very enjoyable journey. I have to say it was more scenic than the Budapest to Vienna journey, as we were following the River Danube, and we followed the path of the River Danube past the North Hungarian mountains, and it was certainly most enjoyable and most scenic run up to Slovakia. I did find it quite funny that as soon as we entered Slovakia, we immediately went from welded track to jointed track. It was only about 10 minutes within Slovakia itself, but with the jointed track there, we were travelling over it at probably 120 kilometres per hour, which is around 75 miles per hour. And it's very rare that we get the opportunity to travel on a train on jointed track at such a high speed in the UK, and it's a sound that I used to hear a lot when I was a kid that I really miss. So again, that just really added to the enjoyment of the train journey. We're now coming up on Eichberg station. The speed limit is now going up to 70 kilometers per hour, and we can accelerate towards that at the end of this right-hand curve here. I'm now just reducing the power slightly, increasing the AFB up to 70. Now increasing the power so that we can accelerate up towards that. I had originally planned on trying to make a video for this channel while I was in Hungary, so I got a lot of photos and video clips of trains while I was there, in the hopes of making a sort of a documentary video. However, unfortunately, I thought that image stabilization was turned on my phone camera when it wasn't. So I've got some quite shaky video clips, and the shake is bad enough that it's really distracting from the viewing experience. So as a result of that, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to make this video of my time in Hungary. That being said, I am now going to Denmark in March around my birthday, which is in the Easter holiday, just around the 22nd of March I think it is. I depart for Denmark and I'm going to be staying with a friend there. So while I'm in Denmark, I'm hoping that I can get some videos of trains that I see while there and try and put something together in the form of a documentary video. This time ensuring that the image stabilization is turned on my camera so that I don't have any shaky video clips. So you should have noticed by now that this video has been recorded in 60 frames a second. I was actually quite surprised that the route was able to handle recording at 60 frames a second. There are some patches which you will notice where the frame rate drops a bit. In fact, it's been dropping to around 30 for a few seconds every couple of minutes or so. That's something which is unfortunately completely unavoidable. But for I'd say 90 to 95% of this video, we are actually running at a steady 60 frames a second. So I've just reset the PZB warning there. That is actually 0.8 kilometers from the signal ahead and is warning us of an upcoming 60 km per hour speed restriction, which this time will affect us because the current line speed is 70. And so what I'm doing now is I'm looking out for the signal ahead, and the moment I can see it in the distance, I'm then going to idle the power and allow the train to coast down, so I can now see the signal in the distance there. So I'm just idling the power at this point just to allow us to lose speed down to 60, and now reducing the AFB setting and increasing the power to ensure that we don't lose any more speed. Again, we had another 60 km/h speed restriction on that signal, so I've just reset the PZB once again. Just to say, on this route, unlike on German routes, when you want to reset the PZB, don't hold down the acknowledge key before you pass the signal. On German routes, what I generally do is I press the page down key and hold it, so I press it just before we pass the signal and hold it until just after we've passed it, and that resets the system. Unfortunately, it does not work like that on this Austrian route, where you actually have to press it as you pass the signal. We're now passing Klamm Schottwein station. Since my trip to Europe, and now I've been on some trains in Europe, I'm actually starting to do research into the possibility of doing an Interrail trip next year. Interrail is actually a rail pass which gives you unlimited travel in up to 30 countries across Europe. There are some restrictions on it, such as in France, if you want to use it, you have to pay a little bit extra for a mandatory reservation on the TGV services. But also, for example, in Germany, you can just jump on and off the ICE services at will, and you don't need any special reservations at all. So I'm actually looking into doing that around Easter next year, if I get the opportunity to do so. Again, I think it would be great to make a great video of the journey that I take through Europe, highlighting some of the stations and the trains that I see along the way. So that's something else that I'm trying to plan as part of the real-life video series, which I mentioned a while ago that I'd like to start making for this channel. Again, I've just resetted a PZB warning, which at the minute they're just continually enforcing the 60 km/h speed limit along here. I am planning on trying to get some more European journeys done for videos for Train Simulator for this channel soon. I'm hoping to do a journey along the Koblenz to Trier route and also the Hamburg to Lübeck when I can sort out the issues I've been having with that route. Maybe I'll just change the train out. I did consider swapping out the ICE TD for the ICE T, and I know that's not technically correct, but I wondered if the ICE T may have ever run along the Hamburg to Lübeck route. So if you know anything about that, please do let me know in the comments, because I'm quite curious to see. I don't want to make an unrealistic video, but I do think it may be a good substitute if the train has ever travelled along there. Now the signal we just passed had 2 yellow lights on, which indicates that we should expect a red signal at the next main signal. However, there is actually not going to be a red there, it's going to be a straight green, and there are no trains blocking us on this route, so I'm not sure why that signal showed the warning for an upcoming red. That being said, because it did show that warning, I'm going to drive as if the next signal is displaying a red aspect. So I'm now going to start cutting the power and just allow the train to start coasting down in speed. We will shortly be approaching Breitenstein station, and the main signal is just 0.3 kilometers after the station itself. So I'm now going to allow the train to slow down and just keep an eye out on the signal ahead. Once I can see that the signal ahead is clear, I will then begin to accelerate once again. You can now see that we've got a green aspect ahead, so now increasing the power and bringing us back up towards 60 kilometers per hour. So in addition to the routes I just mentioned, I'd also like to do something on the Munich to Rosenheim route, which hasn't been covered at all yet either, and I'm still also hoping to do a full run between Munich and Garmisch-Partenkirchen at some point in the not too distant future. In addition to that, I'm also hoping to cover some more American journeys, particularly the Marias Pass, doing a bit more on the North Jersey coast and the Northeast Corridor, and also the Norfolk Southern Coal District route. So they're really the 4 routes I'm hoping to focus on for now, apart from of course the new American route which is coming out soon, which I am hoping to get on release day if possible and get a video up as soon as I can after that. I also still haven't forgotten the Class 90 train guide, which I plan to continue working on. So I'm hoping to get that up over the next few days. In fact, that's one of the primary videos I'd like to focus on now, is getting the Class 90 train guide online, as it's been quite a long time since I last made a train guide video. In addition to that, I haven't forgotten the London to Brighton route guide. Unfortunately, I haven't managed to get it done this January, and with university now coming up, there's a good chance that I won't actually be able to get it done until the Easter holidays, just because it's going to be an extremely time-consuming video to make, and I'll certainly see what I can do. We now have another 60 km/h warning at this distance signal, which is the first warning out of Breitenstein station. The warning is 1 kilometre from an upcoming 50 km/h speed limit, and once we reach the next main signal coming up, we're then 0.3 kilometres from the upcoming 50 km/h speed limit. So I'm just going to, what I'm going to do now is drive to the main signal, leaving the power on, and just after we've passed the main signal, I will then cut the power to allow the train to coast down to 50. So we're just coming up on the main signal now with 300 metres to go to the upcoming 50 km/h speed limit. At this point I'm now going to cut the power just to allow us to lose that speed on the uphill gradient here. I'm now just also reducing the AFB setting. We are now down to 50 in time. That was slowed down just slightly too early there. Just put the power back on now so that we can maintain a speed at around 50 km/h. As I already stated earlier, we'll actually be maintaining a speed closer to 45 km/h. Just looking at the scenery this route goes through and all of the tunnels and viaducts and bridges and everything that's been constructed for this route, I can't help but wonder just how difficult a task it would have been to build this route at the time when they were building it, which I'm presuming was the 19th century, or if not at the very latest, the early 20th century, when we didn't have a lot of the technology that we have now. This route must have been an absolutely mammoth task to build. I'm actually very thankful to them for building it because, as I said earlier, the scenery along this route is just absolutely spectacular. And I really do hope to travel along this route myself in the future in real life. I'm hoping to possibly do it when I do the Interrail pass. I'd really like to visit Innsbruck and then travel through Austria from there towards Vienna. So along here for now, I'm just going to continue to reset the PZB warnings, which we're getting, which are enforcing a 60 km/h speed restriction, though the line speed is 50 km/h, and where you have a discrepancy between the line speed and the signal speed, you should always choose the lower of the two speed limits as the actual speed limit that you're going to follow. We're now coming up on Wolfsberg Tunnel station. So we've now got around 14.5 kilometres to go to our destination. And just to point out, the signal entering this tunnel was displaying 2 green lights, which means clear. However, actually at that distance signal you do need to press the PZB acknowledge key or the emergency brakes will be applied, so that signal is displaying an incorrect aspect. We're now coming up on Semmering station, which is the main sort of station between Gloggnitz and Mürzzuschlag. At Semmering station we've got 13.5 kilometres to go to our destination, and the speed limits will be going up very shortly. This is also the summit of the route, as after this we're going to have a short level gradient, and then we're going to be travelling downhill nearly all of the way to Mürzzuschlag. We're also going to have a higher speed limit, initially going up to 65 km/h, and then finally 80 km/h for the majority of the remainder of the journey into Mürzzuschlag station. As we enter this tunnel here, the speed limit is now going up to 65 km/h, and we can accelerate towards 65 at the right curve in this tunnel. Just going to cut the power back for a moment just before increasing the AFB setting. Now increase the AFB setting and we're accelerating up towards 65 mph, which at this point, now we're on a level gradient, we should maintain a speed of almost exactly 65. Now that we're doing around 65, I'm actually going to idle the power for a moment, just to allow us to lose a tiny bit of speed. That's because we're going to be starting a downward gradient just after this tunnel, and I don't want us to gain too much speed along here before the speed limit increases further. Once the speed limit has gone up to 80 kilometers per hour, what I'm going to do is set the AFB system up to 75, and the reason for this is that on downhill sections it works the opposite to uphill, whereas when going uphill it maintained a speed around 5 below our target speed. On the downhill section it maintains a speed around 5 above the target speed before the brakes actually control us so that we don't accelerate any further. So if I set the AFB setting to 75 kilometers per hour, then the train will maintain a speed of around 79.5, something like that, and won't go any faster. So the speed limit is now going up to 80 kilometers per hour. I'm going to accelerate towards that just past this underbridge here. So I have now increased the AFB to 75 kilometers per hour and given us a little bit of power to allow us to accelerate up towards that. I'm now going to shut the power off and allow the train to coast, and then the locomotive itself will start applying the brakes, which it is doing now, and it's just going to use the brakes to control our speed from this point. We're now coming up on Steinhaus station with 9 kilometers to go. As you can see, the train is now comfortably maintaining a speed of around 79 kilometers per hour, and we're not actually going to have to do anything now with the power or with the AFB system until just before arriving at Mürzzuschlag station. So just to explain a bit about the bug which we're going to encounter as we get there, we're going to have a signal with 2 yellow lights on it which indicates expect red ahead. Indeed, I believe that it's displaying that aspect because the signal at the end of Mürzzuschlag platform is displaying a red aspect for us. Now normally what you would do is you would press the PZB acknowledge key, which is page down, and the train would enter monitored mode with the 85 lamp illuminating. However, unfortunately, this doesn't happen. So as we pass the signal, if I press the PZB acknowledge key, the train does not enter a monitored state. And so as you're slowing down towards the station, everything is running fine. But just before you enter the platform, the emergency brakes will be applied and you'll get a pop-up in the corner saying that you released from a monitored state while the signal ahead is at danger, which of course isn't true because you didn't enter the monitored state to begin with. Just to point out, we're now passing through Spittel am Semmering station. So as a result of actually not entering that monitored state, and then the computer telling you that you did and you've exited it, the emergency brakes get applied and you have no control over the train. This is obviously a bug with the route and something which needs to be addressed at some point. The only solution I have to it is to stop just before the platform. There's actually a shunt type signal with some white lights on it. So I'm going to stop just before that shunt type signal with the white lights, just to pretend that that signal is red. And then at that point I'm going to turn off the PZB system, because you can't turn it off while the train is moving. And then I will be able to drive into the platform without the emergency brakes being applied. So what I'm looking out for along here now is the double yellow distance signal, and then from there I can start to make the approach into Mürzzuschlag station. I believe I can now see the double yellow distance signal coming up just ahead. Certainly looks like it. So as we get close, I will press the PZB acknowledge key just to show you what happens when I do. Or should I say what doesn't happen when I do. So just passing that now, I press the acknowledge key, and as you can see the 85 lamp isn't flashing and the 1000 Hz light below that hasn't gone yellow, which means that we have not entered a monitored state. Now at this point in a moment I'm going to start applying the brakes, just very lightly initially, just to now bring our speed down in time for the sort of shunt signal which I mentioned, which is just outside the station. So I'm now in a step 3 brake application, which is bringing our speed down quite nicely. Seems the frame rate's decided to drop here for some reason, down to 20 frames a second, so I do hope that sorts itself out in a moment. I do apologise for the lag which I'm experiencing here. It's a lot worse than the rest of the route for some reason. You can now see the signal coming up with the white lights on it. So as I said, I'm just going to stop just before that and then turn off the PZB system. So I've now stopped just before the signal. I'm now pressing Control and Enter. I need to just keep pressing it several times, and now the PZB system is disabled, as it says in the top right corner, so I can now accelerate towards the station ahead. I have actually been asked if I've got the Just Trains Railjet yet, which includes another version of this locomotive. Just like to say I haven't at present, as I haven't been able to afford it, but it is something that I do plan on getting at some point in the future, and maybe driving a return journey on this route in the Railjet locomotive instead. So we're now coming into Mürzzuschlag station. You can see there's a red signal just ahead, so I'm aiming to stop just before that signal in the platform here. Coming in slightly quick there, so I had to brake a bit harder than I originally planned. I should still stop just in time, and now reduce the braking so that there's a more gentle stop at the end. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really do hope that you have enjoyed it. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please don't forget that you can find me on Facebook for the latest updates, and my Facebook page is in the description of this video. Once again, thank you for watching.